Now when you think of a C63 AMG, the first thing that comes to mind is a raging V8 that will dominate the entire experience. But as you might already know, this Mercedes-AMG C63 SE performance, that very long name aside, hides an incredibly complex hybrid powertrain underneath it. But before we get down to driving, a short tech lesson is needed. From a V8, the new C63 now packs a 4-cylinder plug-in hybrid powertrain. But this is slightly misleading, since it now puts out a maximum system output of 680 PS and over 1000 Nm, although you only get this figure in certain drivetrain conditions. The 4-cylinder in question is the Manic M139 motor from the A45, placed longitudinally and reworked with a massive electric turbocharger, improved cooling and internals to make it the most powerful 4-pot in the world with 476 PS and 545 Nm, paired with the 9-speed NCT. Working with this is an electric motor that makes up to 204 PS and 320 Nm, fed by a 6.1 kWh battery pack. But unlike most hybrids, this motor's main function is to assist the engine rather than improving efficiency. So at any time you have electric power on tap. The electric motor powers the rear wheels along with the IC, but both can also send power to the front when needed via the all-wheel drive system. There's a separate 2-speed gearbox for the E-motor. This is an especially complex system that monitors drive parameter to supply anywhere between 25 to 80% of its electric power at all times, with 100% power coming up in the launch and boost modes. Now that I've told you about all the numbers that make up the C63 AMG, I think it's time to just put it to the test and at a place where it should be very well at home. Now just to show you the amount of tech that's on board, there's this something called boost strategy which I'll explain to you. This uses the TrackPace app that you have in AMG cars with its timing functions for racetracks to optimize performance from the electric motor. All you really need to do is have the file from your racetrack downloaded onto the car. It then chooses 2 profiles based on your preference, either a hot lap or an endurance setting, which again manages the electric motors in 2 different ways. So what that was it uses the electric motor to know exactly, say example at the BIC, where it should deploy all of its 680 PS, and it tells you on the screen, kick down right now, and that's where you'll get all the performance. Now the first thing that you notice is that it's not very quiet. Yes, it doesn't have that big bellowing sound of a V8, that big sense of presence of a V8, but this is not a quiet car, or this is not a car that you might be afraid that you will not have enough attention. It does make quite a racket around you, especially on the inside with all the piped-in audio, and in the race mode as we are right now in. It's a car as loud as you would want it to be. Like I've said earlier with the A45 too, you might think on first glance, looking at the numbers, that this 4-cylinder will be very unruly, rough, considering how energy dense, how power heavy it is. You might feel that it might be a bit difficult to tame, but again, you notice that it's very linear, smooth. There's really very little in the way of you knowing that there's turbo. Like, of course, this engine, we always know that it just keeps pulling. It has that really sharp, high-end performance. But the way this electric motor works is also really quite nice. Like for example, right now, you've noticed that it will work very closely with the IC motor and just fill in all the torque gaps. So what that means is you have this very clear linear performance all the time. So pretty much there's a whole load of power or torque available to you at all times. Yes, it won't give you that full 1020 Nm torque. At very rare occasions it will give you that, but always just managing itself very well. There's no waiting for the gearbox to kick down or the engine to be in its power band to give you a good shove of pace. Now this means that the C63 is shockingly good at powering out of corners or at maintaining momentum around the track, but it has brought with it a slightly distanced engagement with the car. You might worry at this time that the relentless top-end surge of a V8 can't possibly be replicated with a hybrid, but Mercedes has gotten quite close. We found that the C63 keeps pulling hard to over 200 kmph on the BIC's back straight. The higher electric gear engages at 140 kmph, so while there is some dip, it's still enough to keep propping up the 4-cylinder and recreate that sensation of a higher volume motor. That said, this is a complex powertrain with numerous components, so in certain situations you do find that it may need more time than natural to know what you really want from it. It has direct cell cooling, the 6.1 kilowatt battery pack. So what that does is, it's managing to keep the temperature of the battery at always 45 degrees, and that in turn means that it can charge and discharge very rapidly. For example, just driving around while I'm talking to you, it's just gone up to 100% charge. So which means that you have a charge port, but you really don't never need to use it often. And that really does help with that sense of performance. Again, it's very F1 derived. So just in the same way that an F1 engine always has electric power on tap, this one too has that. Here on track, this car manages its weight really quite well. Now with that all-wheel drive system and the variable geometry steering and the rear wheel steer that you have at the back, it's only 2.5 degrees, but it does its job. You notice that even at very high speeds, it's turning in so quickly, as you can see. Even when there's a lot of forces acting on it on the track, it's not running wide, it's not losing composure. Yes, it's not got that very nimble, light feel to it that you get from something that is genuinely lighter. The 2.1 ton weight most noticeably shows up around BIC's tricky parabola, where you find that it tries to run wide a bit more than ideal. The race mode is great on track with the slight slip it gives you via the AMG dynamics. You can use this in the BIC's tight corners to keep the car flowing, so even with the all-wheel drive system, some of the rear-driven balance can be had. It's also worth noting that the braking performance remains predictable and progressive even with the standard steel brakes fitted here. You notice little interference from the regen system, at least out on track. It's not especially sharp or pure in that sense, but man, it's so effective here on track. You can just keep cornering really quite hard. You really have to sort of recalibrate, considering that at the end of the day it feels like a C-Class, but the way it takes corners is really quite impressive. The new C63 may look like a beefed up C-Class, but only for the second time in its history, it now carries a completely new front section. There's an 83mm wider track and a 10mm increase in wheelbase, all of which has gone into integrating the new powertrain. So there's a visibly more aggressive stance to it. You have the usual AMG enhancements over this. So the AMG style grille works with the blacked out lighting and the beefy intakes in the air dam with the exposed radiators. There is a new bonnet too with more aggressive contouring to house the powertrain as well as additional venting. The AMG badges are a neat touch too. This flat aggressive stance continues to the sides. Here the softer C-Class bodywork works well to give you that traditional cab rearward sedan look, although the Aero style 19-inch wheels could have amped up the sense more. The rear is relatively simple with a blacked out diffuser section and the quad exhaust motifs. The red highlighting and the added cladding seen here are part of the F1 edition cosmetic upgrade, but we'd skip those. Now while the regular C-Class is so calming and soothing on the inside, the C63 AMG, as soon as you get inside it, you know that this is really quite an aggressive machine. Now this is the F1 edition, like I said, this is a limited edition model, so you get all the red highlighting is over it, but there are some really neat touches that go over this. For example, this carbon fiber paneling here, the red stitching, this AMG steering wheel with all the toggles for the modes, as you can see. The boost function, like I said earlier, you can program it to each track, but you can also then just activate it right from the steering wheel. Same with the AMG dynamics, which change the traction settings and so on. Now having said that, what really will be of most help to you as a driver, I feel, is the seats. Now they are the new AMG performance seats. They're a bit different. You can see they have the one-piece design, but they really do cocoon you. They're quite an aggressive seat. So if you have a broader frame, you might want to choose the lesser AMG performance seat that's also available. And then that theme also continues with the screens. You have, of course, the regular screens that you get in any of these Mercedes cars, but you have a few more. Especially you have the track pace screen, which tells you all the boost functions and so on that I was just showing you on track. So all of that comes in here. Priced at rupees 1.95 crore, the Mercedes-AMG C63 SE Performance is a big step up in price over the last one. There's also the matter of this drivetrain being somewhat divisive among enthusiasts. It takes calibrating what you have traditionally expected from the C63, which may be too much for some. But look past this and you have a car that may be complex, but it sure is effective. It uses the latest tech to give you a natural, engaging feel from behind the wheel, which will scare you and make you grin in the way a performance car should.